Hey everyone, this is Isaac. I'm CEO at Trullion, and today on AI Accounting Intelligence, we'll be talking with real people about real things related to AI and the impact on the accounting industry. Stay tuned. Hey, how's everyone doing? It's Isaac here with Accounting Intelligence. I'm really excited today because, today I have someone who I would consider a friend and a colleague, and someone who's had an amazing career and pretty exciting story. So Guzel Lumpkin is CEO and co-founder at EVLUV, and has a lot more to share about her background in CPA and CFO. But Guzel, it's great to have you today. How you doing?
Isaac, delighted to be here. Excited for our conversation today. Hey, everyone. My former CPA colleagues that tuning in today, super excited for this conversation today.
Awesome. And Guzel is coming at you from sunny San Diego. I don't know if you guys can feel the energy, whether you're on video or audio, but we're going to do our best to have a good time today. I think what's unique about this conversation today is Guzel has the distinction of being, having a CPA background, being a CFO, and now being an entrepreneur, which I think is really cool and really unique, in addition to all the other amazing, personal and professional qualities. But before we jump into all that, give us a little bit of background, Guzel, and kind of your journey up until today, especially those little moments of accounting love along the way.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's funny. My story, I would say, is very twisted and turned, but I've always been mathematically, analytically minded and always wanted to be in finance or accounting. But my journey didn't quite start that way. I ended up starting my college career in linguistics. And then only when after I moved to the United States is when I was like, okay, now I'm going to pursue my dream and my love for finance and accounting. And ended up getting my degree and getting recruited by Deloitte. And that's where now it's like graduating from college and in 2 months hustling and getting the CPA license, test done, and then starting my crazy career at Deloitte. That was super exciting. That was, I think, a very, very rewarding part of my career where I learned a ton. It felt like I was getting 3 years of knowledge in 1 year. It was just so fun. And then that's where I also kind of got my bug for software and entrepreneurship and love for just the tech startup space as well, because some of my clients were in tech startup space, and I I was hired to build accounting and finance team for a software called MindBody. Back in the day, we were super tiny still, and got to do IPO there. And then after IPO, I realized I actually enjoy that private, super fast growing, fun, hair on fire type of environment. And then I joined Procore, another super exciting vertical SaaS startup, and got to do the same thing. We're just building accounting teams and systems and processes and getting to IPO with lots of different fun in between. And so, yeah, it's been quite a crazy career. And then again, felt like I really enjoyed super early tech startup stages, and got to do some CFO gigs at some tech startups early on, and then I even did medical device company, and so that was a very interesting ride. And realized about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, that I want to build something of my own. I want to solve a problem, and so here I am. I'm sure we'll get to talk about that a little more later.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And so this is like such a fun, arc and story. Deloitte, top Big Four, MindBody, which, it's kind of yoga, wellness, studio management software, correct? Did I get that right? right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
when everyone's starting to become a yogi, right? You're living on the West Coast. Procore, a construction software company that just started to grow like crazy. It had every elements of the bootstrapped and then the venture backed and then the IPO kind of SaaS story. And then a CFO, you mentioned medical device. I think when we talked, it was around the time of COVID, right? Which I mean, these are all the hot places, and now you're in EV as an EV entrepreneur, which is another really hot space. Maybe I'll like just thinking back to Deloitte and kind of that starting point, and then you mentioned something about coming to the United States, so it sounds like that was part of the path, the opportunity. I guess did you love accounting and finance so much that you knew that you wanted to go to Deloitte, or did you see Deloitte and the Big Four as good entry points into a professional career? So that's number one. Like maybe it's a little bit of both. And then do you think it's still like that today? Because a lot of people they're like, oh, I'll go to Deloitte, work there for a few years, and then I'll jump. Maybe a little bit of what brought you to the Big Four, and then if you think it's changed for some of the other people graduating these days.
Yeah, what a great question. So funny story. Funny story. Um, I think I was like 12 years old. I was getting interviewed at my school, which was a teeny little school in a village in the middle of nowhere in Russia, right? And I think I was like a student of the year or whatever they were doing an interview. And my mom has a recording of it. And so she reminded me about this because I long forgot about it. But the interviewer is asking me, hey, who do you want to be when you grow up? Where do you see yourself? And funny enough, I answered, I want to work in tall buildings and wear a business suit. I have no idea what sparked that answer and what was my dream at that time. I was just apparently obsessed with wearing a business suit and being in very tall buildings. And in where I was growing up, there were no tall buildings. I mean, the tallest building was 2 or 3 stories, right? And
Wait,
so,
Giselle, I have to
yeah.
interrupt for 1 second. Tell us the name of, if you will, can you tell us the name of the town or the city where you grew up? You said it
Oh
just,
my God. Yeah, you want to look it up. It was Ulyanovsk region, and the village was called Staraya Kulatka. It's like
wow.
a little
I just
village
heard the
in
name, so we can feel it. Not a lot of tall buildings. Honestly, it's
no
hard to
bad.
pronounce for me. The region and the city. So we'll stick with a
Right.
small town in Russia, but I love it. Okay, but we got to get
Yeah,
to tall buildings and suits somehow. So
exactly. So, luck so had it that I ended up in the United States, and I decided to pursue my passion for finance because my dad had a different plan for me. He wanted me to be an interpreter because that's how he thought I will fulfill my dream of traveling the world. And so I was studying linguistics for a hot minute in Russia, and then I came here to practice my English, which was non-existent. And so I ended up going to college in Moore Park first to get some of my accounting college classes and stuff, and then went to Cal State Northridge. Cal State Northridge had and still has an excellent accounting program, just one of the best. And we were there was a Bet Alpha Psi, and I was there too. I was a president of Bet Alpha Psi actually too, and we were organizing this get to know you type of events with Big Four. So EY, BDO, Deloitte, PwC, everybody under the radar that we could bring to campus. And, you know, I fell in love with Deloitte for a good combination of the reputation and culture, right? Like every firm, as you know, has a little bit of a different reputation for culture and the stigma, right? Like PwC is super strong, KPMG is more of a party, and Deloitte and then EY are kind of in the middle. And so to me, I think one of the things that I was told by my mentor, when you go to Big Four, it doesn't matter which four, but when you go to one of those where you feel home, you kind of get an MBA while getting paid, right? You get such an intense education, such a kind of compact, cramped, like some people look at it, they're like, oh, don't divide my salary by number of hours of work because it will be miserable, right? But you look at it as like, you get what you put in, right? And so, yes, I actually, at least, went into Deloitte with eyes wide open, knowing that I'm going to work my bones off, but I'm also going to learn a ton. And so, I think at that time, Deloitte was looked at, or Big Four in general was looked like, if you want to have a career in accounting or finance, it's going to serve as that springboard for your career. And I think it did for me, for sure. Today, I think generations are different, right? I think what you're seeing today is people value more work life balance. And when I say work life balance, it's more of a life side of it than the work side of it, the generation today. And I think a lot has changed since when I was at Deloitte versus today. And I think we're going to talk a lot about what really drove that change is AI and technology. Where back in the day, the work that we didn't like so much, that didn't actually contribute to our development and growth and excitement, is a lot of busy work that technology has solved today, that AI has solved today, right? And so I hope, I actually would be curious if you know firsthand or just talking and working with Deloitte more, if number hours billed by associates and seniors and managers have reduced because so much of the audit work can be now handled by technology and AI.
It's a great question. I'll take it. I'll take that question. I mean, first, just a few things. You mentioned that a mentor talked to you, so I think that's always good if we have time to unpack that. But like finding great mentors along the way, I love like learning that you were originally going to do linguistics and actually be an interpreter, because I always say that accounting is the language of finance. So in
Yeah.
certain ways, you are an interpreter. It's just a lot more with numbers than with the linguistics. And also, I just like before we talk about the AI for a second of kind of the big four and where it fits within career development, it does feel like a really nice time where there was a lot of people in the world, and maybe they were in Russia or India or Belarus or really anywhere, South Africa, and a way to those tall buildings and that career path was through the big four and some of these things. I'm not talking about the American dream. I'm just talking about like kind of the global dream is these would be paths to kind of come into the big business world in the big city. And so it does like make me reflect a little bit on a time where I felt like that was a common thing, and wondering now, we don't have to get into politics or anything like that, but like if that's still going to be a common path where there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to come up in this global environment. But let's just assume it is. There's a lot of people working hard out there to get into the big four and other major companies in finance. I think as you talk about AI and finance, and if I sense in your tone, and to be honest, a lot of people who are both CFOs and within the big four, there is definitely a concern and at least a question about how is technology and AI going to impact our job. And we're talking about it in the context of career growth, right? So there are less CPAs than there were yesterday. There's less prestige associated with a lot of jobs. A lot of times that's important. You're a senior in college. When I graduated, going to Deloitte, that's really cool. You got stamped. I don't know what it's like today. I because I'm not in college, but that prestige is super and super important. So AI and also technology is having a massive impact, right? AI, artificial intelligence. Guess what the big four is? HI, human intelligence. That's what you're selling. Really smart, uh, insightful people that will help companies and their clients, find results or new creative strategies, whatever that is. I think it's coming. I think it's here and it's coming, and it doesn't mean that people go away or there's this crazy change. I just think people need to step back and kind of reframe and just revisit what the principle of accounting services is, right? Which is delivering good services for your clients. And if you think about it in terms of billable hours, or you think about it in terms of tasks, or I don't know, like the classic thing is document reading. We at Trullion deal with this all the time. In theory, someone can give you, 500 documents, and you can charge them an hour a document or 2 hours a document to read those. But in reality, you could also just automate those with AI, probably charge the same price, and deliver the value. So, that's how I feel. I feel like AI is here and it's coming, but that doesn't mean that the model has to change. Like the challenges and the prestige that is worn off exists because a lot of the technology has not been adopted quickly. So I just assume that uh, I assume that the sooner that companies like the Big Four can turn to that technology, again, not internally built, working with best of breed third parties, there may be some near term revenue cannibalization of of the billable business model. But yeah, the people that are grew up in Russia or whatever it is and are coming to the Big Four to be in the tall buildings, they're going to enjoy their job more. They're not going to think of it as busy work. And when you were coming up, I would guess the fulfillment that you got, right, is going to be more than the fulfillment that someone gets today, because relative to the tools that were available when you started, I don't want to say back then or pick a year, but like
It was back when it was.
yeah, like, okay, you were using Excel. Well, Excel was fresh and new and it was the best thing out there. And maybe now it's not the best thing out there, but it's still important. So, yeah, I mean, Gazelle, I feel a little bit nostalgic with you, even though, we're pretty young and cool and hip.
Yeah.
Just seeing, how fast technology changes over the years. So it's amazing. Well, good. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Deloitte and that rise, and we're going to unpack a little bit more about AI and EVLUV, but just I'm getting curious. Like Mind Body, that pivot from Big Four, tall tower to a startup, right? A yoga startup. Like how? I mean, it wasn't a yoga studio; it was a tech company. I'm sure you got some benefits.
Helping.
You can tell
Yeah.
us about those benefits, but like, was it really, really hard to adjust to the tech startup world coming from the Big Four? And what were some of the ways that you navigated it?
Amazing question. And I think it also talks about I can talk about what was fulfilling and what was not fulfilling in Deloitte, right? Like as an early stage professional in accounting, what your responsibilities were. And a lot of times, this whole concept of ticking and tying, I don't know if you've ever heard the concept, but it's
Tick and
like,
tie, yeah.
uh, what is it?
Tick and tie, yeah. You got
You
to tick and tie,
tick and
yeah.
tie, right? And tick and tying is like reconciling one document to another or many other documents. And I think it was probably the least mind, like the most mind numbing task and least enjoyable task that a staff could do. But it was so necessary for quality of reporting and accuracy, right? Things that would get a CAO in trouble, CFO in trouble. Like, that's what keeps them up at night. And so the auditors will a lot of times dragged into kind of mind numbing, mundane work of just reconciling one document to another, making sure there was no typos, there were no errors, no calculation issues. Where I think with technology, that can be easily automated, and there is a lot more confidence in the numbers, right? We used to like our partners at the time, who are much older than me, would say, "Oh, you guys got it easy. You have Excel. We used to have those long yellow papers with the rulers that we were doing everything on." but um, but moving and transitioning to from wearing that auditor hat to moving into the business. um, I still remember my CFO at the time, Brett White, an incredible leader and just a very, very smart man. Also, kind of came up through Big Four and moved into CFO roles. One of the things he told me in the day one, he's like, Guzel, you got to hang your auditor hat on the other side of the door. And here you are here to solve business problems, right? You're not here to tell me what's wrong. You got if you see a problem, solve the problem, right? And I think that was one the most challenging, the scariest, but also the most fulfilling lesson, right? And experience, right? Where you go from, okay, I'm just here to tell you what happened, having more intelligent conversation and how you can bring your knowledge of accounting into solving business problems.
Love it. And then and again, hearing about Brett, and you mentioned mentor, it's just, I'm picturing all these great leaders over the years. Procore, you guys went through an IPO, right? You're
Yes.
the senior controller, VP of accounting, it looks like. What's it like to go through an IPO and be in charge of the accounting world for that size company? First of all, what was the market cap approximately when Procore went public? And yeah, what was that
Well,
experience like? 9 billion?
yeah. So 9 to 10 billion, I think it
Good.
was. Yeah.
You guys
It's
did good.
very,
You guys did great.
it was, yeah, it was definitely, I mean, the times were perfect, right? Too, for an IPO at that time. But did the IPO at MindBody too, and the whole IPO process is it's an event, right? It's a liquidity event. It's one transaction. It kind of gives you a badge of honor that hey, you've grown up, you've got your stuff together, you have your people, systems, processes, hopefully, but it is a very significant, but it's a liquidity event, right? And so it's the question is more what leads up to it and how do you get to that level of maturity where you can provide insights not only to the business but also to your outside external investors, that is highly regulated too, and want to make sure that it's not like, oh, when you're private, hey, if we can't report on this today, we'll report on it next week. There's not a lot of penalty. But when you're a public company, things are a lot more stringent and there's a lot more on the line, and there are a lot of more consequences if you report something wrong. Like as a CEO of a startup yourself, right? Like you still have responsibility to report to your investors, but if next quarter you find something that was wrong in the previous quarter, chances are you're not going to have big consequences. You'd be like, okay, here's what happened. Here's the reconciliation. No harm, no foul. It was honest mistake, whatever, right? Like, and you move on. Where if that happens in the public environment, consequences could be quite severe, right? Where you could lose investor confidence. The stock market could overreact to something that's may not have that big of an impact on the business in general, but that confidence that you've built up can be within the investor community can be easily lost. And so there's a lot more stake. And so you got to make sure that you have, I was call it people, systems, processes
Yeah.
really dialed in before you graduate into public markets.
Got it. Okay, that sounds awesome, and I'm sure it's something that people will aspire to go through that event. It's funny you talk about kind of the investor updates and the external emails. Whereas on the public side, you're filing an S1 and they go into 10Ks and 10Qs and everything like that. I mean, I'm just reflecting here at Trullion, right? We're at Series B, between Series B and C, and it's fun. You were with these companies when they went from Series C to IPO, and at each step, for me, it was like seed A, B, and the questions you get change. So the questions at seed are like, okay, what's the vision? What's the pitch? It's like on a deck, right? And there's probably not even a number on the deck except TAM, the addressable
Yeah.
market size. And then A, they start to ask about ARR, not revenue, ARR, right? Annual
Right.
recurring revenue. Series B, what was your ARR last year versus this year, right? Now, getting into Series C, they start asking these really strange questions like, what's your cash burn, right? What's your EBITDA? And then all of a sudden, as a founder, you're like, wait, what? This is new. And so I'm just drawing that straight line from the seed stage to where you were at Procore and MindBody, which is really, hey, I've got to have all my financials right and all my ratios and all my SOX and all my memos and all my documentation. And yeah, it's kind of fun to see the journey. And I guess for people out there listening, um, the the value of accounting and the scale of accounting changes throughout a company, right? And I think earlier it can be a lot more strategic, and then later it can be a lot more compliance oriented. Now you need both compliance and strategy, I think, all the time, but sometimes it's just the nature of how much revenue you guys have, how many, like you said, external investors, like how many people want to put money into your company at any given moment. Well, better be it better be pretty buttoned up. So it was nice. It's nice to kind of hear about that IPO trajectory. Well, speaking of early stage, I got to get to EVLUV. I want one more question, right? So you're going into these companies. You're obviously more tech savvy than the average former auditor, if I may say. No offense to anyone out there, but what's your philosophy to implementing technology and maybe even AI on your accounting teams? And how do you think that's different than a lot of your peers? Do you think you're ahead of the curve, about the same? Just kind of tell us a little bit of your playbook and beliefs on tech, implementing tech and AI even.
I think because I was so kind of not burned, but annoyed, I would say, by manual work, even at Deloitte, right? I was always a tech forward professional, right? When I moved into MindBody or Procore. So uh, implementing systems, always my first answer to any scale solution, right? Scale problem, right? Like, hey, we want to scale. There's two schools of thought there. Some people say, hey, we have a problem, we got to hire somebody. And to me, it would be like, hey, what system can we implement or improve on, or even make sure it's operating as designed? And then how we can change the processes to solve this problem. And so I loved always understanding, like, not just, hey, here's a tried and tested types of solutions, right? ERP maybe like NetSuite. I'm a big fan of NetSuite. I've always implemented NetSuite at every company. It did the job, and it could scale really well. NetSuite can scale from super early stage all the way to supporting a public company, right? But for other ancillary type of solutions, I always looked for best in breed for problem to solve, right? So be that, hey, for the longest time, interestingly enough, financial models like FP&A models lived in Excel because people were comfortable with Excel. Usually FP&A analysts just love Excel. They love their shortcuts. They know how it works. There is no mystery behind it. And so I think that one is usually the hardest to transition into a tool and get everybody's buy-in, right? Because frankly, FP&A tools can get really complicated too, and then you need to have somebody just to support that tool. So that was always my challenge, I would be honest there. But anything that relates to payments, collections, any sort of reconciliations, any other process automations, I was always on a lookout for what is the best out there, whether it's a commissions or travel system or RevRec solution, it's like, where my team members spend the most time, like, capitalization of software or leases. Lease accountings can get very hairy. And I have a very fun story from Mindbody days. Actually, what got me to Mindbody was a lease agreement. If you want to hear that story. But yeah, I think to me, I always look at automating things. I think now I see more and more how accounting teams can run on fewer people with really good systems that integrated with each other, right? Like instead of having, used to have accounts payable specialist, accounts receivable specialist, or a whole team of them, a staff accountant and a senior accountant. I talk to a lot of startups now, Series B and C stage even, where they have like one person handling all of that, and all their systems are just, operating as well-oiled machine. They get your APs done, AR done, reconciliations done. You got to just do a review and more or less close the books if you have fairly simple business model. But back in the day, I had to have a room full of an army of accounts receivable specialists, and then a team of AP specialists, and the staff accountant. And now I think you can actually build a business with, handful of people.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, first of all, I gotta at some point I gotta talk to that person who has a one person finance team. We at Trullion we have about I would say 80 employees, and we have three in the finance team. They're great, right? They're a fantastic team, and it's kind of teams are getting leaner, but it's like you need certain domain experts for each of those areas, right? Like really strong FP&A, really strong revenue if you get into complex revenue, right? And maybe a couple of people on that team and stuff. You're definitely right that teams are getting leaner, but it's almost like these leaders are getting really good at picking the software and managing the software. And then I've seen a lot of this trend. I mean, you mentioned FP&A tools. A lot of people with a CPA, Deloitte auditor background, they don't start talking about FP&A tools within a few years. They may talk about their ERP and their close management, but I think that's really powerful to be able to expand beyond accounting into some of the forward-looking stuff, which is obviously why you ended up a CFO as well. Now, with that lease story, we'll have to save that for another day, but I'm very, very curious. I don't, because I don't think we ever got to work together, which is unfortunate. You were already off into your CFO and entrepreneurial world by that time. But of course, we at Trullion have RevRec and leases. If anyone out there is listening, and we were talking about this kind of stuff, because I remember we did a CFO roundtable in Los Angeles. And this was like a year and a half ago. We were talking about kind of AI in the future. I think we did it with Ashok at Deloitte as well,
Yep.
and Graycroft, the venture capital firm, and Brent. And I remember we had a coffee next door. It was a really nice LA outdoor cafe, and you were telling me about your startup, your potential startup that you were thinking about. And I just remember being really, really excited, kind of pivoting between the AI of the CFO discussion and the startup discussion. So I have to, I have to ask, and I'm sure people will be very curious. Uh, like, how did you get into EVLUV? And I guess tell us the story, a little bit of that story that you shared that day of getting into now going from CFO an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I definitely remember. It was a great meeting, and it was a great conversation with you. And I definitely really appreciated all the wisdom that you shared, because that's, I think, mentor work keeps coming up, right? Is that you have to find at every stage of your career the mentors that can help you and elevate you and like light a path that you're trying to take. And I think for me, that conversation was very pivotal, right? You definitely encouraged me. And that's encouragement is super, super valuable in that time, like where you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? Am I crazy for doing this? Am I like, am I biting off on something that I
All
won't be able to
crazy. We're
do?
all
You will
crazy.
be a little bit. You got to be crazy on the journey because it's a difficult journey. It's not for everyone. It's like you've said, I think at that time, it's like it's a very lonely, lonely job. Oftentimes you'll find yourself by yourself. So you got to build your network and support. But to tell a story about how I came up with EVLUV and my why behind it is I think I would always aspire to run a business and own a business and build a really healthy, fun, strong company. And after being in so many startups and investing in some startups or advising startups and consulting startups too, I've seen a lot of kind of do's and don'ts. And so I think it gave me that confidence to like, hey, I can do this because I've seen enough and I've done enough. But the idea came actually to me on a Procore's campus. And Procore had this beautiful campus on the bluffs of Carpinteria. And back in 2017 was one of the first companies I've known installed electric vehicle charging on campus. And that's when I bought my first electric vehicle. And first, I would say a few months, it was wonderful because finding parking at the charging station was easier than finding regular parking on that campus. But very quickly, I think EV bugs started catching up to the rest of the employees, and we started having 10, 20, 30, 40 EVs on campus. And getting access to the chargers became completely unpredictable. And, sometimes I would be stuck at work at 6, 7, 8 p.m. trying to get some chargers to get to work and get home because it just all day we had this round robin things. Somebody would come in the morning, plug their car, and then you kind of have to keep running and picking or looking at wait lists. And it was a hot mess. It was like Slack, Google Sheets, what have you. And so at that time I was like, somebody has to solve this. This problem of getting access to highly utilized asset or highly desirable, it wasn't utilized, by the way, a highly desirable asset has been solved before. And it's like, restaurant business, Open Table solved this problem a long time ago. He's like, hey, how do I get people butts and seats at high peak demand times efficiently and effectively without consumer having to wait for it, and for the restaurant owner to maximize utilization of their chairs and the tables, And that's how the idea was born. It's like, I want to build Open Table for electric vehicle charging because as the number of EVs is going to increase, and we already see that for the past many years, access to the chargers will become more and more dire and constrained. And I think it was, 2022. I actually I looked at the app. I wouldn't tell you which app it was, but it said the stations were available. In fact, it said 3 stations available. I had barely any battery left in my car. So I'm fully reliant on this app, and I show up and 2 chargers were broken and one just got swooped in right in front of me. I could see them pulling up. And I had no charge left to go and find or try my luck somewhere else. And so I actually got towed away. So I missed my meetings. I was, my whole day kind of fell apart. I was, just very frustrated. And I started doing some research and I was like, okay, nobody has solved this problem yet. It's either that or you got to go work, for somebody else, So with a lot of encouragement and support from friends and mentors that I was like, I can do this. And so, yeah, here we are, launching the product and ready to go.
Amazing. I love it. And so EVLUV, Open Table for electric charging, which is it's kind of cool. Like, look, Open Table, if you show up at that restaurant and you don't have a seat, you're going to be really hungry. right? But actually, you could probably go next door or down the street and eat. If your charging station isn't there, you may be stuck, right? So we, we obviously have to figure this out. This is a big, big infrastructure problem that, EV vehicles, which we all want because it's better for the environment, right? It's better for everyone. We have to figure out kind of this equation. So you're going and figuring this out. Now, how do you use those CFO or auditor early stage startup skills? I mean, which of these skills are you applying as an entrepreneur now that you're kind of like, oh, I knew that from, MindBody or Deloitte, right?
Yeah. Um, I think different days, different skills for sure apply. But even let's say starting the company, thinking about what type of company I want, what is my business model? I think that's a question number one, right? Like I think my experience with various startups and understanding the tech space, the venture capital, the fundraising side of things, right? What investors are looking for, what good business looks like, what type of KPIs it needs to have, short term, long term. I think that knowledge and the base really helped me to take a measured risk. I mean, entrepreneurship is a risk, right? Undeniably. And to me, I had to make sense in my head how crazy of a risk that is and like how where are the risks really. And so in order for this to work, what needs to be true, and then you kind of test it, right, and test your assumptions and stuff. And so I think that was definitely a critical knowledge, because I've seen a lot of startups crash and burn because they had an idea and they were so fixated on idea that they've never tested, like, oh, how am I going to make money? you know where the money is going to come from, who's going to pay for it, and what would be the unit economics. Am I going to be forever losing money, or there will be some point of profitability, etc.? And so I think uh, that part is very critical, right, in making sure that, hey, you're not just chasing an idea for an idea, but you can say, hey, I can build a viable, profitable business down the road. And this is how. I think me being exposed, like at MindBody, there was no GC up until like 6 months before IPO. So I wore a legal person hat. I was the person who's working with all the law firms and managing internal things that gave me exposure to a lot of things, be that, cap table, how to form an entity, because we were opening up new entities all over the world, and what is S Corp, C Corp, and why one is more important than the other, and how to kind of set up a company and all that. I think that was definitely something that helped me a lot. And I think knowing a little bit about every function in the company by virtue of being involved in the holistic picture of the company at different stages, I think that helped me a lot too. Like, finding, I think you and I talked about, how do you find, hire, and manage resources offshore, onshore? How do you make that, decision where to hire? And so I think that was definitely something that I had a skill and experience with already.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, just, now that we've kind of gone through it, you think about it. I mean, Deloitte is a services company with a billable model, right? And high value on the brand. I mean, that is a brand, big, big brand play. MindBody, probably two-sided, right? You've got studios, you've got users, right? You've got a software component. I'm sure you got to go in maybe adjacencies. If you could do yoga today, could you do gyms tomorrow? I don't know what those conversations were like. Procore is really cool because it's kind of set up as feels like a construction marketplace where you've got kind of multiple SaaS products on a singular platform, probably different models around usage or milestones and all that stuff. So I think I can feel some appreciation in seeing all the different models. And I think people, I think, in the accounting role, um, I think accounting people, at least internally at the corporations I've worked at, maybe underestimate the amount of exposure you're getting, because you're getting to see different business models, different pricing lines. You mentioned legal. You're privy to a lot of interesting information. Believe me, the staff accountant knows a lot more than kind of the senior sales guy when it comes to data and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, just reflecting on the Trullion journey, so many of the things, whether it was a legal entity or the proper jurisdiction, like if you don't get those things right at the beginning, or at least are thinking about them, it can really, mess you up along the way. So I'll ask like one more question, and then maybe we'll wrap it up with another one. Uh, you talked about pricing and kind of the business model and figuring out how to make money. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about that in terms of EVLUV? And if it's secret, you don't have to tell us, right?
Um, I'll give you a quick kind of overview, but there you can't. I think at this stage you have to be open to many different
Yeah.
opportunities. You can't be fixated on one model, but you have to explore viability and profitability of different models. Right? I think it's not a secret that anybody who wants to open up, financial statements of existing, more established charging networks, the profitability is an issue, right? And I have a personal opinion about that, of course. But again, to me, I feel like the one of the missions for EVLUV and why I'm building EVLUV is to bring effortless EV charging for EV drivers while providing profitable business venture for businesses that host these chargers. Both sides have to happen and meet and be happy in order for EV adoption to take place, right? If the host is not making money and if it's an unprofitable business, they're not going to install EV chargers. If there are no EV chargers, nobody's going to buy EVs, right? At the same time, EV drivers have to have effortless, seamless experience in order for them to keep coming back to this asset, to this charger, and therefore make it profitable. If the asset is not being utilized, if the charger is not utilized, it's not going to be profitable, right? Like there is no ROI. I've talked to some of the networks and providers. They're like, "Oh yeah, we've installed this charger and we spend an unknown amount of money on it, and the payback is probably 5-6 years." Well, yeah, what's your utilization? 7-8%.
Right.
Why is it? And I think the answer is, if the drivers don't have great experience, they're not going to come back to that charger. And if it's not being utilized, it's just forgotten thing that's sitting there and costing money. But our model is, how do we increase utilization by providing that effortless, seamless experience? And if our goal is to help both the drivers and the hosts to have, effortless charging and profitable business, we want to take part in the profitability, right? Like, hey, our goals are aligned. We're not here to drop as many chargers on your property as possible. We're here to bring a profitable business while still providing maximum access to your tenants, guests, employees, what have you, right? And residents. And so all that to say, like, there's different models that we're exploring. That there could be a subscription-based model, but there also could be a rev share model. Again, it depends what that particular host, what problem they're trying to solve.
It's very, very interesting. I love it. So we're gonna end off on a question. I'm gonna ask you a question in a second, but just kind of digesting some of them. So some of this. So you've got to monetize the driver aspect and the host aspect, right? That's a super challenging play. I mean, Open Table, obviously had to market to users and to restaurants. Same with Yelp. Same with Airbnb and Uber. These marketplace models are really, really challenging, but when you crack it, you get the spoils. And in the same way, Uber started in one or two cities and maybe launched in other cities. There are different ways to scale these business models. That doesn't mean it's not easy. But what I love, first of all, Guzel, you are a EV owner, correct? You've got an EV car.
Really, I don't have gas cars.
Very, very passionate about it, which really, really helps. Um, what I'll say about hearing, you and just thinking about my experience, it is very possible that good ideas are very, very good ideas, but it's still early. And I think that's one of the hard parts about entrepreneurship is we're so used to this like instant reward kind of media blitz uh, thing where everything used to happen in weeks or months and now it happens in hours or seconds information wise. And in reality, we're in the early days of EV, right? Like, and you are on the cutting edge of a problem that absolutely needs to get solved. And there are tons of, you know, everything from real estate company to logistics platforms thinking about how to solve it. So I will just share as a side note, that's a blessing and a curse of entrepreneurship is being early means you have an advantage, but being early means you got to really have that passionate. So I think being an actual EV user, right, and having also that confidence of a career is great. My last question is, and then we'll wrap up. If you are a CPA or CFO or controller and you're thinking about starting a startup, right? What is one question you should ask yourself or answer? Like one thing you should ask yourself to say like am I ready to do this? Right? What give us just a preview before someone takes that jump.
Great question. And what you just said about I think what we call it patience being too early. And it's interesting because both MindBody and Procore were too early to where they were.
Yeah.
They had 10-year overnight success. It took them 10 years to get to that first milestone of any sort, right? Because there was no 5G network on construction sites until 2012, 2013. And they started 2002. So with that said, I think is related because you have to know your why. If you're a controller, you're a CFO or an accountant, by default, very analytical, right? And very money savvy, but also could be frugal, right? Like, hey, money is kind of important and I want to see profit right away. I want to see, outcomes and pay and all of that. And without knowing your why, and having high conviction on your why are you doing this, right? How much passion and how much patience do you have to go through very high highs and very low lows? Without knowing your why, I think it would be very hard for anybody like myself to start an entrepreneurship journey.
I love it. Well, good. Well, Gazelle, I really appreciate the time. It's fun talking from a small village in Russia to CEO and co-founder of EVLUV. Always know your why, right? That's the key. Just great seeing you again. And everyone can, listen online, and I'm sure you can catch Gazelle on LinkedIn and all the other sites to learn about what she's doing and what she's building. So we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun, and good luck, everyone.